Los Guachimontones does not spring from the earth fully formed, but its origins remain a little unclear. Phil Weigand's earlier work is really important here because one thing that he did with his research is he was, I think, so surprised by what he found here that he began running around just trying to map and record things as fast as he could, rather than going into a lot of depth in any one place through excavation. So he did 30 years of survey. He recorded a lot of sites that no longer exist. So he gave us a general picture that we would not have had he instead chosen to excavate in great detail at one place. So that's really one of the contributions he made in a way, and one thing that he was able to show, I think, is that there are a number of rather distinct looking sites that all seem to be quite early, earlier than most of what's at Los Guachimontones. Phil documented a series of sites with names like San Felipe and San Pedro and others. And these are different looking monuments. They're circular or oval looking constructions. All of them were looted when he came across them, but enough for him to be able to tell that they had burials within them. So these are circular burial mounds, or circular or oval burial mounds. They're individual structures. They were not associated with other buildings like, let's say, a Guachimontón was. There's even one of these that was neatly bisected by the highway crew that cut straight through this circular mound, and obviously the destruction involved was good for nobody, but it did expose the interior and what it looked like. And Phil actually drew this section. A lot of his work involved sort of rescuing the information just as destruction was taking place and before it was completely wiped out. And what he could show in this cross section is he showed this mound, right, this earthen mound. And he could show something of its construction with stones to either side, flanking it, sort of making this external facing. And he showed in the very center a stone box with a burial in it and with a lot of ash and other things. So we have sort of this one example here, not of an excavation by any means, but of a window into what these things looked like in their interior. And it actually gives us a lot of information, I think, about some of the ideas at work. So most of these mounds all seem to be gone now. These circular or oval mounds appear to have been completely destroyed, with only a couple of examples that may exist. One of them is at a place called El Campanillo. Berenice Heredia and I began a project to investigate El Campanillo and for its position in the broader sequence, perhaps its connection to the origins of Los Guachimontones. And we chose El Campanillo because it still exists, one, it hasn't been destroyed yet, and two, it's kind of close. It's at the northern edge of the site of Los Guachimontones. And so there's this circular mound there. Phil actually identified it as potentially another one of these early constructions. However, there are buildings, a couple of buildings on top of it. In Phil's map, it looks like perhaps an early, or a possible simple Guachimontón, but it's on top of an earlier circular mound. Well, that sure sounds like we might have an early construction and then a later construction on top of it. Attached to the mound at El Campanillo is a ball court, which would probably also be a later addition. So you could imagine, let's say, one of these early mounds as Phil saw it, but with a later addition to it that's more pertinent to this later time period that's distinctive to Los Guachimontones. And it's kind of close up there, right? So the question becomes, what is the connection between that and where we are now? Was El Campanillo, let's say, part of the early occupation of this region, pertaining to a time period we call the Middle Formative? was that sort of the occupation at that time, and then by the late formative did the focus shift to where we are now at Los Guachimontones. And that would be quite interesting, right? That would be sort of the origins of a lot of things. On one hand, it would be the origins of perhaps this transition to the Guachimontón form, going from a burial mound to instead this complex of shared power between a group of elite lineages. It would be the origins of this place, right? Why this place as opposed to El Campanillo up there? There may be a reason for that. Los Guachimontones is kind of a special location, actually, for a few reasons. Here we are at the foot of the Tequila volcano. The Tequila volcano is big and obvious and in the background there. On the other hand, we have below us, we have this, what would have been at the time, an extensive series of wetlands. Both kind of wet and a bit swampy, fed by the Rio Teuchitlan, and no doubt attractive to birds and fowl and turtles and what have you down there. So we have the sacred mountain behind the site. We have a wet area, much like the portrayal of the underworld in the Mesoamerican cosmos. And then right in between, well, maybe El Campanillo could have sort of fit the bill, but you can't see the wetlands from there. From Los Guachimontones, you can. Phil's excavations at the biggest circle of Los Guachimontones was also kind of indicative in this regard. On one hand, he found a spring there. There was a spring where Circle 1, the largest circle at the site, is today. But their excavations into the patio, they went down about 6 meters, and they found the remnants of an old pond. So let's sort of put all this together in a way, right? We have these watery, references to the watery underworld as it was viewed in ancient Mesoamerica. You have this watery underworld, and it's represented in the wetlands below the site, in a pond directly below the site, and symbolically in things like the patio and the ball court adjoining the circle. You have the sacred mountain represented, of course, in the largest circle at the site, the big central conical pyramid, and the Tequila volcano in the background. So you have the natural landscape with these references to the broader cosmos as it was envisioned. And then Los Guachimontones right in the middle, combining its position on top of that pond with its position intermediate to the mountain and to the wetlands. So the site of Los Guachimontones may have been chosen as part of this transition from the middle formative burial mounds, which no doubt were of importance to maybe a lineage or a couple lineages who would bury their dead there. But Los Guachimontones now is instead this larger community with shared power, and they've picked a location on the landscape that brings together these views of the cosmos and the replication of it in the architecture.